The political cognoscenti, the insiders, have already begun to read the tea leaves on the 2022 election. And one of the journals that is very good in doing this is the National Journal. When I was in D.C. many years ago, the National Journal was mandatory reading. I'm not so much into the inside baseball of day-to-day politics, so I don't read it anymore. But I spotted an interesting article online, Josh Kraushaar writing about how the Democrats are thinking about the 2022 election. And what Kraushaar does is he looks at one of the biggest Democratic Super-Pacs, which is putting $100 million into the Democratic Party for the 2022 election. And but the interesting question is, how are they spending and where are they spending? Because when they put a lot of money on a race, it tells you something. It tells you that they know something about that race, and this is why they're spending a lot to fight it out. So Kraushaar actually begins by talking about Las Vegas, and he's talking about the city of Las Vegas. Now, the Democrats just did some redistricting in Nevada. And you would think that as a result of the redistricting, they would have protected the 3 urban seats in Las Vegas. And those seats would be safe. So you wouldn't need to spend a whole lot of money on them. But no, out of the $100 million, $11.6 million is going to try to protect 3 Democratic incumbents in inner city Las Vegas. And what this means is that the Democrats are worried that Dinah Titus, Susie Lee, and Stephen Horsford are all going to be swept out of office. This is in a place that Joe Biden won. Well, he won Nevada, but he also won Las Vegas. And but he won it closely. And so the point is that this is a sign that the Democrats are not looking good, even in places where they should be stronger. There's a black plurality seat in this is Sanford Bishop's seat. And we're talking now about Georgia. And 55% black district. Biden won with 55% of the vote. And normally a Republican would have trouble knocking a black guy out of a black majority district. But this guy, Bishop, is evidently in trouble. And Republicans think that their Army veteran candidate, Jeremy Hunt, might beat him. And so a whole bunch of Democratic money is going to shore up this guy to try to protect him from getting defeated. Republicans, by the way, have targeted a whopping 72 democratically held seats to flip this year. Now think about it. The Democrats have a fairly thin majority in the House. And if they lost 50 seats, let's say, this would give Republicans a 30 or so seat majority. And that would be fantastic for us and very bad news for Biden. His legislative agenda would be effectively dead right there. And the Democrats also facing problems in the Senate. Now we turn to California. Democrats now have supermajorities in large parts of California. And they did some redistricting in California to try to take Republicans who had won narrowly and put them in trouble. So a good example is Michelle Steele. They redrew her district and they made it more Democratic friendly, thinking, okay, now she's done, she's cooked, she's finished. But the environment has changed so that Michelle Steele is leading even in the redrawn district. And so the Democrats are going to throwing a lot of money into that race. They thought they could win it easily before. They can't win it easily now. So I think Kraushaar's point in looking at these individual races is a bigger one. And that is that the Democrats and the Republicans actually agree that the Democrats are facing strong headwinds this year. Now, this isn't just what you would call historical headwinds. Historical headwinds are basically that, look, you have one party in power and 2 years later, there's always a little bit of exasperation with the party in power. So the other party generally does better. But we're talking about the other party doing a lot better than even what historical trends would suggest. And we're talking about wipeout possibilities for the GOP in November. Now, we had a couple of wipeouts, but you'd have to go back to 2010 when there was a kind of anti-Obama wipeout, 2014, a second anti-Obama wipeout, but there hasn't been one of those for a while, and there certainly hasn't been one of those favoring the Republicans. So the way the Democrats are spending money, this is Krashau's point, illuminates the fact that the Democrats are having to defend areas where they thought they should be safe. They have given up on certain seats where they thought at one point these could be contested, but now the lead is too formidable and it's not actually worth there's limited dollars on both sides. So you have to make choices, and the choices that the two parties make show you what they think that they can win and where they think it's worthwhile to spend money. All of this means the GOP is looking good at this point. It's still several months away for November, but I think it's really important for the GOP to be thinking not just about can it make advances, but what is the agenda for which the Republicans should claim a mandate. Republicans need to say that we are running not just on the opposite of what Biden stands for, but here is our plan. And we realize that if we win in 2022, we can't put that full plan into effect. We can pass laws and we can pass bills through the House. They'll have to go through the Senate, but of course Biden could veto them. There's no way we're going to have a veto-proof majority. But nevertheless, that'll be a testing run for an agenda that the Republicans could start putting in place if they win the presidency in 2024. So I think the Republicans need to think about not simply being the opposition party. Opposition is, in fact, a good strategy, and opposing bad things that Biden are doing is probably the main reason that Republicans will win decisively in November. But they need to marry that kind of reflexive oppositional strategy to a kind of more visionary, practical strategy and legislative strategy that will pay dividends not just over the next 2 years, but ultimately in 2024 and beyond.